And joining me is Joni Ahrens. She is the Executive Director for Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety, as well as Cindy Wheeler, who is also a citizen who is concerned. And both of them are here to tell us about some of the latest developments that we are seeing coming our way from WIP. Joni, I understand there's a shaft that is being built, but you have concerns about this shaft. Why?
We have concerns about the proposed shaft because it's already being dug. And what we perceive to be happening is that this is for forever WIP to bring more plutonium-contaminated waste from nuclear weapons manufacturing to the waste isolation pilot plant. It's important to know that WIP is a pilot plant. It was supposed to operate for 25 years to demonstrate the safe disposal of radioactive, toxic, and hazardous waste from nuclear weapons manufacturing. And for your listeners, it's important to know that plutonium is radioactive for 24,000 years, and it takes 240,000 years or 10 half-lives for it to become non-radioactive lead. But during that period of time, it turns into a lot of different radioactive materials that are even more dangerous than plutonium. Plutonium is dangerous if you ingest it or you inhale it, and only a minuscule millionth of a gram will cause cancer. So what's going on is that the Department of Energy received a temporary authorization to build a new, what they called a utility shaft or a ventilation shaft. Its name has changed several times over the last 2 years or so. And what it is, it's 1,200 feet west of the existing WIP site in the salt beds, 2,150 feet below the surface of the earth. Now, the Environment Department provided a temporary authorization to begin digging. Then they waited 7 weeks before they released a draft permit for the public to review and make comments. Comments are currently due August 11th, Tuesday, August 11th. And there's sample public comments on the CCNS website along with an extensive timeline if you're new to WIP. Our concern is that DOE's been given a head start on the shaft without any public participation, any public process for opposition. And we wonder how far the DOE has already begun, how much depth have they gotten? You know, are they a tenth of the way to the 2,150 feet or more? You know, where are they in this process? And while they continue to dig every day, we have this comment period, and we're trying to encourage as many people as we can to write comments about or to use the electronic form or the old cut and paste form into an email to get comments in.
So I understand, though, this shaft is being built to help with ventilation for the workers because the workers are experiencing a lack of ventilation. So isn't this shaft needed? What are your specific concerns around this shaft?
The shaft is not needed. It's important for your listeners to understand that the Department of Energy is finishing up a new filter or a new ventilation building on the surface to provide over 100% of the air that's needed in both the contaminated areas and in the non-contaminated areas so that the workers have enough air to do all of the different things that need to be done, such as maintenance, such as disposing of the waste, such as mining new rooms to put additional waste. There's no need for a new shaft that the Environment Department authorized, even though that they knew that the new filter building will be done in a year or so. This new shaft has been approved through a temporary authorization when everybody's very clear what the new purpose is for. It's for expansion of the waste isolation pilot plant.
To store more radioactive material.
Yes, from weapons production.
And I also understand that WIP was supposed to be designed to only hold a certain type of waste, but now you're concerned that all types of waste are going to be stored in WIP.
So the waste isolation pilot plant is restricted to only receiving waste, plutonium-contaminated waste generated from plutonium pit production. Now, there's a series of other environmental impact statements at other Department of Energy sites, such as the Savannah River site, to bring 34 metric tons of what they call surplus plutonium to the WIP site. That is not allowed in the existing Land Withdrawal Act, which restricted the waste to transuranic or plutonium-contaminated waste. There's other proposals to bring high-level waste from nuclear power plants, both defense-related and commercial sites, commercial meaning nuclear power plants that generate waste or generate power for residential and businesses. So there's 5 different proposals stacked up, ready to bring, to ship to WIP in some sense for disposal, which the new shaft would facilitate. It's interesting that the new shaft is not like the existing ventilation shafts, which are, 10, 12 feet in diameter. This one's 30 feet in diameter so that they could put a waste hoist to take the waste down into the underground. CCNS formed in 1988 to address community concerns about the proposed transportation of plutonium-contaminated, radioactive, and toxic waste from Los Alamos National Laboratory on St. Francis Drive to I-25, going north to 285, and then going south. DOE said that they would be able to clean up all of the plutonium-contaminated waste at sites like Los Alamos, like at Sandia, like Pantex near Amarillo, the Idaho National Laboratory, Rocky Flats, Hanford, Oak Ridge in Tennessee, and the Savannah River site. Now they're saying we won't be able to close in 25 years like they promised us in those nascent days of CCNS, where they said we can close in 25 years, which when they opened in 1999 would be 2024. So the hazardous waste permit that the State Environment Department issued back in 1999 says they'll close in 2024. Now they're saying, well, they started off saying, we're going to close in 2050. Oh, no, we're going to close in 2080. And now they're saying we don't want a closure date. So we believe that this is all in support of expanded plutonium pit production, which is the pits are the triggers for nuclear weapons, which they plan to do for the next 50 years. They started drilling down into the salt beds where the waste is disposed of the day or the day after they received the temporary authorization.
Tell us what your biggest concerns are, Cindy, as a concerned citizen about this particular issue.
It takes 10 half-lives for a substance to be to lose most of its radioactivity. And so for plutonium, that would be 240,000 years. But almost all radioactive elements go through something called a decay chain, where it turns into other radioactive elements. And the element plutonium turns into, for one, uranium-235, which has a half-life of 700 million years. 10 of those is longer than the planet has been in existence. So we need to stop making this material that we don't know how to store.
And how much exposure does a person need for this to become life-threatening or even just perhaps cancer-causing or or endangering
So a
to one's
millionth
health?
of a gram of plutonium-238 in your lungs will cause cancer. Any exposure to plutonium causes cancer, whether you ingest it or you inhale it. And so it's very dangerous. And some of these shipments that are already coming to WIP include aerosolized particles or particles that can be aerosolized in an accident. So this has already been of concern, but with increased shipments as a result of expanded forever WIP will result in more chances of accidents.
I'm concerned now at seeing this new goal of moving so many more metric tons of this waste to WIP and the number of years that they plan to have it on the roads. To explain, I live in El Dorado, and El Dorado is this housing area just south of Santa Fe. There's several surrounding communities, and all of them together probably have about 9,000 residents. And we're all right along Highway 285 South that goes to WIP. If I speak for anybody, it's the people who live along this part of Highway 285 South that I would speak for, because it is the designated highway for taking radioactive waste to WIP, but many of us don't think that it's able to handle it. So, for one thing, it's a very dangerous traffic area because it combines heavy truck haul traffic with residential traffic on the same road. And there are a lot of accidents there. Also, these heavy truck haulers have been traveling for hours, going 65 to 70 miles an hour, and then suddenly they have to adjust to being in a residential area where there's stoplights and intersections and a 45 mile per hour speed limit. So it's dangerous, and we've had lots of accidents there. Also, I know that as far as having, if there were an accident, the emergency response preparedness that needs to be in place is the responsibility of the state of New Mexico. Even though the federal government is forcing the risk on us, we have to have 24/7 emergency response ready in case of an accident, which is very expensive. And New Mexico is a poor state. And that money could be better spent on getting better outcomes, educational outcomes for our children, or many other things. And the other thing is there's no form of liability insurance, for loss of life or health or property. And we saw that precedent set in 1945 when the Trinity bomb was set off. And the people who we now call downwinders were the people who received radiation exposure from that. And to this day, they're responsible for covering their medical expenses and for the property that they lost. So we don't expect the federal government to suddenly change its feeling of responsibility towards New Mexicans. And just imagine the concerns of anyone in our position. We know accidents happen. The Challenger Space Shuttle disaster, the tsunami at Fukushima, the canister more recently that exploded at WIP and shut it down for 3 years. And I just learned that it was only luck that canister waited to explode in the storage facility, that it could have exploded anywhere along the route to it. And so knowing that, the idea of increasing exponentially the amount of this waste and the amount of time that it's going to be moved is more like trying to describe not if a disaster will occur, but when. It's apparent that we don't have the strong regulatory agency protecting us that we need, and at the least, everything should stop until the pandemic is over. And the public has an opportunity to get out and make its concerns known. And because we're the ones that will suffer the consequences of any mistakes made by these agencies, New Mexico Environment Department, it will be new people when that happens. Or the DOE is too far away. So I think those who stand to suffer the most should have voices in those decisions.
And at this point, you're feeling as though you don't have a voice.
Right, not just feeling, but we really don't. I mean, August 11th, when the country is shut down in a pandemic, is the deadline for us to have any voice. That's really not giving us a voice.
And Joni, did you want to add to that? Anything around that?
We don't have a voice. And it's not just folks in El Dorado. It's the trucks come into New Mexico in Raton, people in Wagon Mound, in Las Vegas, in Roswell, Artesia, and then the people that will get the shipments from the east in Tucumcari and other communities, Santa Rosa, who don't have a voice in all of this about expanding WIP forever. The thing that concerns, I think, both Joni and I the most is that nobody knows this. It's not that it's being kept hidden so much as nobody seems to understand that this is coming our way. And that's what we want most of all. And we need people to know about it.
And if people do want to find out more about it, where do they go to find out more?
CCNS is serving as the host of a lot of information about this. We're working with a lot of other groups, including Citizens for Alternatives to Radioactive Dumping, or CARD, the Southwest Research and Information Center, Nuclear Watch New Mexico, and others. Our website is serving as a place for information, along with sample public comment letters that you can use, along with action alerts that you can forward to your friends and family, because the transportation will be taking place across the country. It's important to let your family and friends know about this proposal and for them to submit comments as well. And it's nuclearactive.org. And anybody can download what we have there and share on their website or their Facebook page. We have information on our Facebook page, our Instagram, and our Twitter. It's very serious, and we need lots of voices opposing this proposed this project that's already begun, due to the temporary authorization that the Environment Department issued in April for DOE to start digging this shaft. At nuclearactive.org, you can find a new action alert about how to get involved. The comments, there's a direct link there to submit comments directly electronically to the Environment Department. And I would encourage people to dust off your old Stop WIP t-shirts, your old protest signs, and let people know that this proposal's on the table and they're actually drilling the new shaft as we speak.
If you just tuned in, we've been speaking with concerned citizen Cindy Wheeler about WIP, and also Joni Ahrens, the executive director of Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety. Why do you think New Mexico is kind of almost being targeted in this fashion for the disposal of nuclear waste?
I think it's because New Mexico is poor, and they figure we make an easy target. They don't realize how enchanted this land is in Washington.
Cindy, it's easy to feel, I think, overwhelmed as a public or just an average citizen for taking on these huge powers that be. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. I think people are feeling the inequity even more across the board in so many areas of our lives. Is it really possible for the little guy to win against these behemoths of power?
What a good question. So I think, first of all, it's the only thing you can do is to keep trying. And when I lived in San Antonio, Texas, which is a huge city, the city-owned utility decided that they wanted to build 2 new nuclear reactors. And many of us were appalled. We had all of the reasons why it didn't make sense, and they were fiscal, they were about safety, they were about the amount of time it would take, and that it wasn't the direction that energy is really going in. And so a few of us became protesters. We opposed it, and our media picked up on that and covered it because this small group of people opposed it. And we were people that weren't trained activists. We made tons of mistakes. We didn't know what we were doing.
How many of there were you in this small group that took on the behemoths in Texas?
Oh, on and off it was 50 people, but not at the same time. We all kind of, everybody's living their lives, and so at certain points, this group of 10 people would work on it, and we all just, you never knew how many people there would be, but there were always people. And I had this wonderful mentor, who I just have to say, her name's Maria Antonieta Berriosabal, and she was the first Latina city council person in San Antonio. And she is one of those few people who's a politician who cannot be bought. She's just, so people like that kept saying to me, you just do what you can do. Just do what you can do, little bit by little bit. But we opposed it, and that was enough, especially when the media then, figured, okay, well, we need to cover this, and they were not built. And the thing that actually makes me the happiest is we had a young mayor who was very for this until he realized that it's not a good idea either economically or safety-wise. And he is a young politician who will now take that idea with him long after I'm gone. And that's really uplifting. That's a good feeling. Margaret Mead famously said that many people think that a small group of committed people can't change things, but in fact, it's the only thing that ever has.
If you just tuned in, we've been speaking with concerned citizen Cindy Wheeler about WHIP, and also Joni Ahrens, the Executive Director of Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety. And if people do want to find out more, where do they go to find out more?
Nuclearactive.org. Our website is serving as a place for information, along with sample public comment letters that you can use, along with action alerts that you can forward to your friends and family, because the transportation will be taking place across the country. It's important to let your family and friends know about this proposal and for them to submit comments as well. And anybody can download what we have there and share on their website or their Facebook page. We have information on our Facebook page, our Instagram, and our Twitter.